4. So did you want to welcome everybody?
I would love to. Thank you, Matt.
All right, that'd be great.
So welcome, everyone. I'm sorry that I can't be visually with you tonight, but as you can see, I'm Roy Young, and I'm the new CEO and president at the Montpelier Foundation. And it's with great pleasure that I welcome you here tonight, and thank you for participating in this book talk with our friend and contributor, Dr. Drew Lanham, and of course, Montpelier's Director of Archaeology and Landscape Restoration, Matt Reeves. I just want to emphasize that this is part of the Orange County African American Historical Society and Montpelier's virtual Juneteenth celebration. And while we can't all be together through the next few days, I just want to emphasize how important this moment is and how excited I am to participate this evening in this book talk. So thank you again. And now, Matt, if you'll introduce Dr. Lanham.
Yeah, thank you, Roy. Really appreciate it. And thanks for introducing the Juneteenth celebration. This is our it's our 5th Juneteenth celebration here at Montpelier. And unfortunately, we had to do it. We've had to do all these events virtually this year, but it is wonderful to be able to really extend Juneteenth over a week. And Dr. Lanham is going to kick off our Juneteenth celebrations with his book talk, and then we're going to be wrapping it up next week at the same time with Betty Kearse, who has written her family's history about. She's a member of the descendant community here at Montpelier, and it's going to be a wonderful set of authors to round out our Juneteenth celebration. But for Dr. Lanham. Dr. Lanham was raised in Edgefield, South Carolina, and studied zoology and ecology at Clemson University, where he earned a PhD in 1997, and where he currently holds an endowed chair as Alumni Distinguished Professor of Wildlife Ecology, and was named Alumni Master Teacher in 2012. His research focuses on songbird ecology, as well as the African American role in natural resources conservation. In his research, teaching, writing, and public outreach, Dr. Lanham seeks to translate conservation science to make it relevant to others in ways that are evocative and understandable. In 2019, he was awarded the National Audubon Society's prestigious Dan Lufkin Prize for Environmental Leadership, recognizing individuals who have dedicated their entire lives to the environment. Dr. Lanham strongly believes that conservation must be a blending of head and heart, rigorous science, and evocative art. To that end, Dr. Lanham is a widely published and award-winning author and award-nominated poet, writing about his experiences as a birder, hunter, Black man, and as a wild wandering soul. He has essays and poetry. His essays and poetry have appeared in publications including Orion, Audubon, Flycatcher, and Wilderness, and in several anthologies. In 2013, Dr. Lanham wrote a piece for Orion magazine entitled 9 Rules for the Black Birdwatcher, drawing attention to the lack of black bird watchers and diversity in general among naturalists. The short piece inspired producer Ari Daniel and videographer Amanda Kowalski to create a short film with the same title for Bird Note, which quickly went viral on social media. In the most recent string of events, Dr. Lanham has been in the forefront of calling for social justice for Black birders and using his following as a forum for leading discussions on racism and Black activism during this tumultuous period in American history. In 2017, he published an award-winning memoir entitled The Home Place, Memoirs of a Colored Man's Love Affair with Nature, which received the Reed Award from the Southern Environmental Law Center and the Southern Book Prize. Most recently, Home Place has been selected as a scholarly book of the decade by the Chronicle of Higher Education and a memoir of the decade by LitHub. Dr. Lanham is currently Montpelier's ecologist in residence and is collaborating with Montpelier researchers to develop a comprehensive understanding of how the wildlife habitats reflect the Madison-era use of the plantation land here at Montpelier and the contributions of the enslaved community on the landscape. The end goal of this collaboration is to reconcile the natural and cultural histories of Montpelier's landscape and incorporate these stories into our visitor experience. Part of Dr. Lanham's power as a scientist and writer is the ability to inspire learning and action. When this storytelling talent is combined with not only making history more inclusive, but also reversing the racist narrative of history, this makes places like Montpelier relevant and needed for the national discussion occurring today. This talk today opens the door to a broader set of interpretive programs that will take advantage of these legacies and stories on Montpelier's 2,650 acres. And it is a pleasure to turn the mic over to you, Drew, Dr. Lanham, my good friend and fellow collaborator on research here at Montpelier. So I'll let you take it away, Drew.
Thank you, Matt. You know, you can always just cut to the short and just say, "This is my friend Drew Birdbrain." It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Roy, for having us, for facilitating this book reading. Thank you, Matt, for being a great friend and for making this relationship more than just a friendship, but really sort of a meeting of the minds in some different ways. And I would like to thank you to the virtual audience out there. Thank you all for coming this evening and spending some time with us. And last but not least, thank you to the wood thrush who has decided to show up appropriately. So the wood thrush is telling me maybe where I need to begin tonight. This will be a little bit of, some of this may be a little bit of repeat. I think 90% of it will be new for most, hopefully. But really, I hope that there's a theme that emerges on this Juneteenth Eve as we think about what was going on all those years ago, 1865. People still in bondage, less than a day removed from being liberated. And so I would like that spirit of the past and liberation and that joy that must have flowed through people at that time to the difficulty that we are having now, and hopefully projecting to some future celebration, some future joy. And so I'll share a number of readings with you in between, maybe a little bit of opining, and hopefully some questions and requests maybe from you. So I'll start with a piece that I wrote back in September of 2019, and this was after a couple of years of working with Matt and having traveled to Montpelier really for a charrette that was sponsored by Nelson Bird Woltz that would really bring a diverse group of professionals together to think about the constitutional landscape. And to be quite honest, I had no idea that my head and my heart would take off in the ways that they did to join Matt and Kat Emhoff and Elizabeth Chu and now Roy Young in this odyssey to understand and illuminate some of our convergent roots, as it were, at James Madison's Montpelier. So this piece was written, I said that I was working at reconstituting the constitutional landscape, conservation and cultural convergences, the heavy lifting of truth-telling. What was in this Old Dominion soil, sweat, tears, blood, and misery, grows green now toward blue sky. Purple bruises to purple flowers, tiny bits of reconciliation bloom in late summer fields. Yellow beauty runs free where others were ugly bound. Thrush voice flung sweet from a darkening wood echoes the bitter toiling songs of those long gone. The ancestors hear from beyond and know somehow sounds unknown in their day. Days of can't see to can't see must now be seen through and through by those of us remaining. The land's wounds heal given care and time. Flowers and trees and birds have much to teach. Our past is here now. What's to come is within reach. And so that social media post, for those of you who know me know that I use social media, especially Facebook, really as a blog, and really use it as a forum for getting thoughts out immediately. And I think it's important as a writer to communicate fresh. As important as editing is, and you can tell by the number of misspelled words that sometimes appear in my posts, there's an immediacy that's important, that's critical to me as a writer, to have an audience see, but more importantly, to have an audience feel. And so from that piece came this piece on wood thrush and a song for reconciliation. Hylocycla mustelina, the Latin name for wood thrush, is the bird that I have deemed the constitutional passerine, a brown-backed ghosted witness to what was under the great ancestor trees that saw our ancestors in chains. These birds are the embodiment of those who were now transfigured into feathered beings. Living ghosts come to haunt beautiful woods grown on top of toil-stained soil. The tulip poplars hear them. The sapwood rings, if played on a phonograph, might very well reflect the voices of field hands trying to get through another day. Towards the outermost marks, the last 100 years or so, the songs of humans are consumed in the songs of birds as forest succeeds from field to reclaim its rightful place. This is ecological reparation, an erasing of appearance, but a preserving of all that has ever occurred, good and bad. The soil repays through the trees. The birds' songs are reminders of task hymns sung under toil. Wood thrush are frequent hosts to brown-headed cowbirds, raising another's young even as its own plight suffers. We love their songs, but pay not a penny for them. Are they willing servants, nurturing others at the expense of their own? They are, after all, among the most audibly abundant birds in the Montpelier spring woods, but hardly anyone ever sees them because they are invisible. Ralph Ellison's birds, merged by brownness into being ignored. Heard but unseen legacies cast out of shadow into the hearts of those willing to listen and not just hear. Consider for a moment a single wood thrush. Consider the trials of a trans-Gulf migrant, a 600-mile nonstop flight across the Gulf of Mexico. Imagine the undeniable pull of instinct and an unknowable knowing that elicits the jump off at dusk from the Yucatan thumb and hope to land sometime in the next day on some Gulf Coast chenier. Then find shelter from wing-wearying flight in a strip of dune woods. The wood thrush endures a middle passage, bringing birds through perils of predation and storms to fragmented habitats and disappearing forests. The birds are delivered on south winds to ecological sinks, where the cost of survival is higher because of suboptimal conditions, and the thriving is next to impossible. It is a kind of ecological redlining, surviving to be denied the best. On a walk last spring through the woods, a flautist piped from deep within the colonnades of tulip poplars and blooming redbuds and dogwoods. "What's that?" someone in the birding group asked. It's a wood thrush, I chime back almost before the question dropped out of their mouths. They must be just arriving on this last front. Doing my best, Eolay, mnemonic imitation, a wavering whistle, then the words. It was a sad rendition of one of the supreme songsters in the Passerin world. I covered myself and gave a lesson of self-harmonizing. It's really singing more than one note at once. Some must work, after all, 2 or 3 times as hard to get noticed. Overworking, ambitious, maybe they are singing songs of past struggle, present peril, and future hopes. Those are my thoughts. And so that's what happens with me on a bird walk, is that the birds become more than things to identify. Oftentimes, those birds elicit stories. They elicit stories that are tied to the land. They elicit stories that are tied to history and their own awesome ecologies. And thinking about what a wood thrush or any other neotropical migrant, that is, those birds who make passage from Central and South America and the Caribbean every spring and fall, back and forth, often enduring tremendous odds to make it back to some patch of woods to breed, then back in the fall to the wintering grounds. Those birds offer allegory to me of a journey that many people, that my people have endured. And so I go to Montpelier looking for answers, but really only find more questions revealed in the founding of a country, our country, my country, to freedoms not given to all. I want you to think about this. James Madison looked out of his study window at a distant Blue Ridge mountain range that would not have appeared appreciably different on most days from what we see now. Yes, the haze of Anthropocene climate change obscures the view, but on the day I first set foot into the big house, I am entranced for a moment by the intelligent toil of one man bent on crafting a document that would guarantee the rights of men. But then, outside of that momentary lapse of romanticizing, I'm looking out towards the same range that Madison saw, and my eyes fall quickly closer to the long avenue and an immense yard that in Madisonian times would have been cropland growing wheat and rye, corn, all kinds of fruits and vegetables, but much of it also dedicated to tobacco. And I want you to imagine Madison dipping and redipping his quill and scratching out the intentions of a Continental Congress speeding past revolution and a new nation. There would have been black men and black women and black children bent over hoes and shovels and mattocks and scythes, tilling earth behind mules and oxen, making the Virginia Piedmont produce by forced labor the fruits and vegetables and fiber that would make Madison a wealthy man, but render the country through partial independence, through civil war, through Jim Crow and police brutality, to important water and to water we can't drink and polluted air to now, and standing there looking out at the Southern Appalachian Mountains stand as witness to billions of years before humans ever trod this ground. But then when my view and thoughts as a black man and African American are cast down from those mountains, my thoughts of Montpelier rise and swell in recognition of a hypocrisy we can't ignore. James Madison, a founding father, chose to look past the brown backs of people he owned exactly like the mules or milk cows, and wrote to the intent and pleasure of his fellow Southerners to keep intact the sin of slavery. The mountains were given the full measure of admiration and respect. The enslaved Madison owned were at best counted 3/5 the being of a white man, convinced by an economy that would have fallen in upon itself had free force labor not been the engine that pulled tobacco, picked cotton, flooded rice fields, cut timber, raised white children at the breasts of black women in denial of their own, that the maximized differential between cost and profit expanded systematically under task and gang and rape and a family dissolution of black human beings chatteled to be nothing more than livestock. And so as Madison picked up his pen and wrote, I'm sure he was fully cognizant of all of that. And even as he scratched on that parchment and rendered some statements by scratching through them as not germane or thinking better of them, the thoughts of keeping enslaved in their station as bondaged human beings remained. And so on that day, that first day, all of those thoughts, as I attended this charrette on the constitutional landscape, all of those thoughts flooded into my head. And so we spent a great deal of time in meetings trying to understand from several points of view how to interpret this constitutional landscape. And for me as a birder, as an ornithologist, as a naturalist, as an ecologist, the bird songs were ever present around me as Matt took us through fields, as he took us into forests, as he showed us artifacts that had been dug from the ground. The place began to live for me just as the Constitution lives as a document. And so it began to possess me. And it began to possess me in ways that have not let go. And in times like this, as millions march in the streets, as we struggle for breath and plead for air to breathe, then I think it's important that we understand these convergences. It's important that we understand these geneses that have brought us to this point. Because I think that in order for us to go forward, we need to have a deep understanding and admission to full truth of what has been in this country. So with that, I'd like to share, inspired as I have been by the wood thrush, I'd like to share a few readings tonight. I'll share some from my book, The Home Place. I'll share some poetry from my book, Sparrow Envy, that you see here. But I will also share some unique pieces that I hope will give some enlightenment as to how this convergence occurs in me. If you haven't taken the journey to Montpelier, I would encourage you to do so. Many of you have probably traveled to Monticello, which is, as the crow flies, a very short distance from Montpelier. Madison and Jefferson were, in fact, great friends and confidants. And so these ideas, I want you to imagine as well that these two founding fathers were having discussions around the rights of free men, but also the compromises that would have ripple effects that see us as Black Americans experiencing tremendous disparities in wealth, in health, even until this day. And so as a writer, I think it's important. We've spent a lot of time over the past few weeks listening to organizations, to individuals, really sort of deliver statements to plead their case, to certainly move forward the issue that Black lives matter. I think it's important individually as we seek changes in policy. I think it's important as writers, but also as individuals, that we have some sort of creed that we can turn to, that we can live by. And so I want to share with you tonight this piece that I've been working for quite a while, that's called Why I Write for Birds. And it's my hope that in part, or perhaps in whole, this will be a part of the next book that I'm working on now. It's called Why I Write for Birds. In these United States of America, where racism seems consistently invincible, in a nation where no region, southeast to northwest, or any far-flung corner out in 2,000-mile transects from the Nebraskan prairie centroid of its alleged greatness, from Olympic rainforest to Florida Everglade, and back up to Vermont verdants, and then down to the southern border walls, where some are attempting to keep love and kindness at bay, and the 50 states crisscrossed over and back again, no place escapes blame. As daily bouts with bias take their toll, and all that is wrong and societally entropic erodes confidence, birds are a constant salve that sometimes eases the strain. Birds are the distraction that makes bitter human realities more bearable for me. Birds give me hope in something beyond the persistent range-wide hate that these days comes in never-ending waves. It is exhausting being a Black man in this country. It is hard to convey the damage and deep wearing impact that day after day of profiling and persecution has on mindset and body being. Microaggressions are the millions of paper cuts that bleed us out, the glances and whispers that cause self-doubt. Regressive policies and rollbacks are the institutionalized prejudices, the waterboarding that tortures and drowns. Overcoming assumptions that your Black male mission is at best some above average ability to bounce or throw a ball, to dance or sing or entertain, as long as we're doing what's coached or commanded, then conditional acceptance comes from the majority readily. But then, should we step too far out of the acceptable constraints of the prescribed arena, things can turn darkly pessimistic. Expectations honed on centuries of stereotyping are entrenched. All the while, educational and economic inequities stoke the industrial prison complex with Negro souls fattened up on trumped-up charges privileged men get probation for. Even as our chances of being slaughtered like rabid animals in the streets with no cause other than dark skin to merit the treatment, coddle possibilities approaching coin-flippable probabilities, all of it demands constant over-the-shoulder glances, checks and rechecks of what someone said or did to ensure that your skin color wasn't the cause. All of this each day demands an energy that takes away from my life, my liberty, and any hopes of pursuing happiness. But yet and still, in spite of this, and somehow in the midst of a system still stacked high and against my African American kind, I seek the solace of nature and birds to keep me sane and safe within my own inner sanctum of wildness. In spite of a post-racial America some wanted to claim within 8 short years of Barry Obama and cries of not seeing color from content of their character, hypocrites that offer no comfort of inclusion or appreciation that diversity really matters, I crave birds like water. I long for birds as a lover would the other half. In those times when I cannot bear firsthand witness to avian reality in some wild space, my writing about it must suffice. Writing that flushes bobwhite quail from thickets of books or releases swallow-tailed kites to float glide in verse is my sustenance. To have words render birds as whos rather than whats is my literary manna. When I can bring identification from field guide to feeling guide and into another's consciousness as a fellow living being worthy of adoration, the work for that sentence or stanza or story is for the moment done. Taxonomy and binomial nomenclature become less than the aim than connection to self and conservation. The birds I daily see soaring, flying, singing, perching, hopping, nesting, are all inspirations to keep living. Beyond the easier task of pigeonholing, identifying each bird by appearance, by its feather color, by beak shape, by flight speed, falcon fast or vulture slow and lazy soar, I wonder what's beyond what I see. I seek some common identity between bird and person. In doing so, I'm willfully blurring the lines, maybe blowing past some scientifically objectified interspecific taboos. Watching some warbler sing, I'm pulled deeper into questioning that takes me past its ascending trill or falling buzz. I wonder if the behavior it displays signifies some healthy state. I wonder if habitat quality is optimal and food is plentiful. Is there cover to escape from persecution of predators? Are there opportunities to choose the mate of your choice? What bends this individual's choice to be in the place that allows me to worship it? What might cause it to expand or contract its range beyond a circumstance I can only witness from afar? I do know that as the free bird sings, we can be deceived into believing that all is well. The happy seeming song can hide distress. It might be a misplaced cry for help. We have to ask, has the habitat been cut down, drained, or developed and paved over? Has food been poisoned or contaminated or unavailable somehow? Are the predators run amok? Domestic cats gone feral or beloved family pets turned loose by careless owners to slaughter and kill? Perhaps populations have crashed to levels where coming together with another or others for nesting has become the limiting factor. What if I'm singing in vain to empty thickets and there's no one left to answer? All of that trips my algorithmic triggers to think and ultimately write about more than wing bars or tail flashes or feather color. If pushed by some force of human action to levels of questionable persistence, or worse, to threatened or endangered status, then how does the bird survive? What factors will push it to thriving? What impacts might cause it to become the end of the line? In all this questioning, the conservation cause falls to common plight. You see, my sympathy becomes empathy. The birds and I not only share the same air, the same water, the same soil, but we share a struggle to make it from one day to the next. There is a tension in wildness. When those wild things' lives live on the wind and can be pushed and pulled across hemispheres by whim of weather or force of will, how can I not find the words to bring notice to them when I not only identify them, but I identify with them? I see a bird, I watch that bird. I absorb that bird mostly without worrying how many other birds I might see or scribe on some list. That bird in the moment is the only bird until the next one comes along. I can take in the places, the forests and tangles and seacoast and rolling prairies. I pay closest attention to single birds' ways of being. And so I write about birds. I write for birds. I write to birds. I write in poem and prose. I word craft in short form social media and long essay. I two-finger tap in minuscule mobile phone font and still sometimes scribble in longhand, an illegible chicken scratch script that lies scattered in notepads and pieces of journals as draft stories and ragged verse. I gather it all and weave and wrap until there is some story in which I can nest. And so I sit and watch and think about the beings I know intimately by song and plumage and habit. I write often with no intent of anyone else ever seeing what I write, but as an exercise in worship and mind space sacrifice. A murmuration becomes meditation. A call from a plover is alms. There is this melding of realities that causes me to lose track of responsibility and time. It is, yes, a selfish act in small personal space that I do not always willingly share with other humans. That might be wrong-hearted, but it is who I have become. An introverted ornithologist codependent on this ornithotherapy that the birds give without cost. But I gladly pay the cost anyway. Knowledge is power, and the more I understand the interaction between earth, sky, birds, and us, the better armed I become to defend the soil and water on which we all depend. I pay with my attention. I pay with my time. I pay by becoming more familiar with birds than a cataloging of numbers seen will ever show. Yes, I know birds by chips and churs and self-harmonizing sonatas. I know birds by the flash of red and gold epaulet. I know birds by miraculous journeys spanned across watery gulfs and landscapes lain desolate by development. I know them by the way they launch themselves into the air on a faith absent worshiping any gods except lift and thrust. I know them by home, by my native Piedmont fragmented into jigsaw pieces, by Blue Ridge hanging on to what's left of wildness, by low country salt marsh pluff mud stinking oh so good of sulfur. I know them by places far away, the tundra swan winging through moonlight, going back to some Arctic realm by the handful of less than an ounce of feather surviving predator and destructive perversion to perch itself in my fortunate view, to grace my puny ground-tethered existence is a miraculous thing. The difficulty in my watching is the ever-degrading context that makes the joy an insular thing. I'm grieving loss and losing ground in the morning. I watch from an island surrounded by a world that seems ever to be falling down in pieces around us. Birds are an escape sometimes, but ignoring that dim sea rising, no matter how grim, is the sin. And so, as I write to beauty, I must wind daily toxic streams of news that pass through my mental binocular view. I must write to the violence, the news of wars and rumors of wars. I must write to racial injustices and hashtag movements. It is the socio-political, fragmented, and climate-inflamed Anthropocene landscape over which we are all migrating, and so it cannot be ignored. To write about birds and not write about their struggles would be akin to writing about Black people as if enslavement and Jim Crow and police brutality and mass incarceration never existed. That I have stake in two worlds that converge at my oneness is best blessing, but also worst curse. Both suffering and celebration fall to me. My Black life matters most to me, and I won't deny my own soul's well-being to make birds small and just something to be seen without deeper connection and feeling. So then, in the stream of so many causes that would seem disconnected from birds and disconnecting enough to cleave us away from nature, I write about birds. I write about birds because it is what I need to somehow discount the dis. Connection and concert are what I need most, especially now. It is because birds will not profile or persecute or imprison me. Birds will not call me coon or darky or porch monkey or boy or nigger. Birds will not build prisons for my son on prospects driven by third-grade test scores. Birds will not deny me clean drinking water or spew flumes of dirty air into my neighborhoods or bring fast food and liquor instead of good, whole, affordable nutrition to malnourished bellies. Birds will not widen disparities of health, wealth, and well-being that cause my life and other Black lives to not matter to you or to be shorter, less joyful, and ultimately less valued. Birds will not redline or gerrymander me into politically powerless corners. Birds will not burn crosses in the night or fly Confederate battle flags claiming no offense intended or shout blood and soil and don't tread on me, all the while claiming that it is heritage and not hate. Birds will not tell me how impressed they are with my articulate nature as if I am some odd creature come to the English language lately, my Negro tongue uncloven from some expectation of guttural language, or simply lump me in with the other person of color because they really didn't notice me after all. Birds will not throttle me by kneeling on my throat or shoot me in the back and claim self-defense. And so I write about birds because they are my last best hope for heaven's angels here on earth, or whatever sublime unearthly things, nirvana or brigadoon, or any alleged paradise I could ever pray for beyond this existence I know might hold. Beyond the fated disappointment of humans who fail in loving consistently, birds do not. I ask nothing of them and they give everything. There is no morning song I ever wish the cardinal had undone or promise of inspiring or nest dream weaving any wren has ever broken or fallen short of. The only possible way for birds to fail me is if they cease to be. For that reason alone, but countless others, I must work to make sure that such a thing never happens. I cannot watch a red-tailed hawk hang high on the wind and think lowly. I cannot hear the chirps of migrants in nighttime transit over my drowsy head and ever fail to wonder how miraculously intrepid they are. I cannot witness masses of European starlings murmurating, see the unified waves of sweeping, undulating, twisting, climbing, diving, wing on wing, rubbing, rustling storms of flocking birds, and think of them as invasives that do not belong. I cannot see a skein of Canada geese honking to some wild heaven as they slide across the moon and not hear the corner of my eye because they are all close fibers. Birds aren't escaping the deepening of my ties. They are as racial consonants in our common plight. This Angelo exactly why the bird, I think, own songs that are caught halfway between joy and woe. Yes is mine. Their hope and best, prepared for the worst, and unsurprising.
Looks like we had some difficulty with Drew's connection. I'm going to give him a call right now. We've had this happen before, and I'm going to connect him up over the phone.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, Drew. Hey, let's. I'll put the phone up to the microphone here, and we can keep on going. You started to fade a bit, and then you completely cut out.
And so I write. I will love birds and all they bring to my life. Here in this heart's place where peace needs to find resting and thriving, I give to you the freedom of a moment's wild escape in some feathered thing. Perhaps it is in some words that I write. I will write in this avicentric worship towards the greater range expansion of love and of inclusion. This writing of and for and to birds then, of how they make my pieces whole, of how they can stitch together the torn apart, the ripped asunder, and revive the dying too. It is Emily's equation of hope and feathers. Then this work from here on out will be my mission, to write for birds, to write to the birds. So, thank you all for hanging on through that. But that's my creed. That's why I do what I do. And in the current context, really, and thinking about writing for birds, it's become, in the past few weeks, increasingly difficult. I mean, after all, who can ignore what's going on to simply watch? And so I find increasingly that piece, which I wrote in part because of some of these inspiration from Montpelier, have for me become increasingly important to make the connections. So Matt, are we still on?
Yeah, we're still on, and it's starting to pour rain here, and the advantage of being outside with the wood thrush has turned to a disadvantage of pounding rain on this tin roof. So hopefully everybody can still hear over the rain.
Well, awesome. So what I'd like to do now, and I promised after that, I wanted to talk about sort of, again, this convergence that for me has become increasingly important. So I wanted to give a shout out to the young folks who a couple of weeks ago really began to change the world. And as we think about what people have done in the streets, marching, all colors, all creeds, it's important to recognize this moment. And one of the things that happened during this movement was a Black Birders Week that several friends really on relatively short notice. And so, as they began to develop this Black Birders Week, and we had discussions throughout the week of what it means to be a Black birder. Again, we could see this convergence of conservation and culture, and what some people take for granted, and being able to go out and watch birds is an untruth. It's not the reality of all of our lives. So one of the things that I wanted to share in sort of this thing is this 9 rules for the Black bird watcher. And this 9 rules that Matt mentioned, it's originally from Orion magazine, but now it is also, you can also find it in Sparrow. So those 9 rules that I wrote have recently been expanded. I'll share just a couple of them. And rule number 3, no bird in a hoodie ever, sadly was inspired by Trayvon Martin. And so again, as I write poem or prose, one of the things that I find is that frequently I haven't been prescient, I've only been present in the current situation. And so that current situation can explode us with lists of names that define these tragedies over and over and over again. So that rule, that 3rd rule of never wearing a hoodie, I thought as I wrote those 9 rules. Number 5, blackbirds. Any blackbirds are your birds. The often overlooked blackbirds, family of Tyranny, are declining across the board. Then there are the other birds that just happen to be black. Crows and their kin are among the smartest things with feathers and wings. They're largely ignored because of their ubiquity and often persecuted because of stereotype and misunderstanding. Sounds like profiling to me. So those 9 rules, and I guess most would call that satire. I had a great question at a reading, actually at a showing of the film, that Bird Note, my peeps in Bird Note in Seattle, bravely had produced a few years ago. And I say bravely because it took some courage for that organization to come forward and to begin to let truths be known about how some of us, what we encounter, feel. I'm grateful to them for that. So those rules led to me thinking constantly about 9 rules or 10 rules or all the rules that sort of lead my birding life. So on May 24th, I wrote, I was out watching a bird, a hooded warbler. And it struck me that this hooded warbler, this beautiful citrine yellow bird, breast of citrine yellow and a back of sort of this olive green. The male has this obsidian mask and it encircles his face. This black push button of an eye, and this tweet, just this ringing from this rhododendron hell up in the South Carolina on the Blue Ridge Escarpment. I'm watching this bird and appreciating who that one bird is, that it's at my little place, that it's gracing me with its presence, and hopefully is helping to raise the next generation of hooded warblers that may come back in future years. But I also was thinking at the time that this is a lucky bird, that hooded warblers are lucky, that they can actually wear hoodies and no one asks questions of them. That vigilante Americans wouldn't mobilize to make citizen arrests if those birds loiter in a strange swamp for too long. And so that's sort of my mind bent, that my mind is constantly in this place, really, to think about birds not just as what's, but as who's. So this 9 new revelations for the Black bird watcher that I started writing the Saturday before so much of this began. I thought, I'm not sure what I was feeling, I'm not sure what I was seeing. But again, just as the original document was written in fast fashion, because I had thought about it, I had lived so much of it, these other 9 new revelations were written. Number 2. Revelation number 2. No one denies the eye-bending beauty of a painted bunting by saying, I don't see color. Revelation number 3. Roadrunners don't get gunned down for jogging through strange neighborhoods, do they? Revelation number 4. Why are some immigrants accepted and others not? Just asking for a European start. A little known fact for many is that double-crested cormorants are still known as nigger geese by some people. I'm wondering if they can at least get updated to Negro as a number. Revelation number 6. Why do people cry and set music to faraway murmurations, those swirling, whirling, aerial ballets of flocking birds, but then hate the very same birds up close, asking again for those European starlings and lots of befuddled blackbirds? Revelation number 7. Just wondering if white people ever tell crows and ravens how impressed they are with their particular intelligence, as if blackness precludes the conflicts. Wondering if the court gets tired of it, because I do. Revelation number 8. Has there ever been a white bird as hated as a black or brown one? And number 9. You know, birds really don't mind if you misidentify them because they know who they are without labels. What they truly despise is the disrespect of habitat destruction, pollution, hordes of free-roaming cats, and the catalog of stupid things humans do to make their already difficult lives harder. Hashtag empathy. So those are the 9 new revelations. And again, just sort of that thinking about birds in this way is important for me as I write. So in that long treatise of why I write for birds, I think I've sort of made a turn perhaps to this place of what I call cultural ornithology. You'll often hear me refer to myself more these days as a bird watcher as opposed to a birder. Not that there's anything wrong with being a birder. I've just taken to a different sort of maybe intention with my watching. And so I invite you, I invite your questions, I invite your observations as we go along here. I do know that as I reach you by phone, and I've lost my visual contact with Matt, that I had a request that I wanted to make sure that I got to before the end of our time. But as I look through Sparrow Envy, I wanted to share a couple of poems from that book, and one of those pieces is called September Song, and Sparrow Envy is my first and only chapbook at this time. I'm working on hopefully pushing out a couple of others. I'm proudly the poet laureate of my home county of Edgefield, South Carolina. I am the 3rd poet laureate. Technically, I'm the 2nd. Laurel Blossom was named as the first, but she and I both agree that David Drake the enslaved man who produced pottery with poems inscribed on them, rightfully deserved to be the first poet laureate of Edgefield, South Carolina. And I'm thinking by that probably would have been the first poet laureate of South Carolina, understanding that for an enslaved person to write or read was punishable by death in many cases. So our words mean something. This is called September Song. That begin to be loved and loving. That is what will be grand. Children chattering and all young people walk and wander, saunter through, scale to spy on the way. Shooting stars, calling wishes to a great sky. A cold night in the desert when I first heard. That is September Song, and again, it's a lot of what I try to write is in the immediate. Sparrow Envy ended up being the name for this first collection of poems. But I often think of poetry as a flash flood. I think of it as a flash of emotion. Again, I go back to that initial visit to Montpelier, and I think about that tour of the house and sort of the immediate dawning that even as I came through the gates, I knew where I was, but to stand and to look at the Blue Ridge Mountains and to have the thoughts of what had to happen and what that meant for me personally, but what it meant for millions, tens of millions of us, what it meant for this country, what it meant for the world, that was sort of an immediate flood of emotion. And so, Matt, I know you're curating still you're still curating for me on Zoom. Are there any other questions or comments or requests that have come through?
One is one person asked for your poem for Lindsay.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah, I think I can do that again. It's rather long, but I would love to share it. For those of you who might not know, a certain senator that represents us, two senators that represent us in South Carolina, Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham. And I wrote this poem originally back in February, early in the year, sort of during the height of impeachment. So Senator Graham made a statement about the lynching, that the congressional proceedings were equivalent to that. And so my flash flood brain, I came up with this. Looking skyward, squinting through leaves, filtering June sun through new green, trying to pin names on singing birds above, I sometimes wonder whether there are trees here that someone might hang me from. Whether these were forests where guttural moans echoed off hollowed bald cypress, where sobbing cries for mercy fell soft on sodden, litter-carpeted ground, where maybe, hopefully, in some final defiant hell-sending curses thrown from the mouths of those God himself abandoned, tamped down by barred owls' dusk hooting refrain. I ponder between spells of warbler identification in the midst of sorting one chip note from the other, parsing hooded, soft pips from more emphatic sips of black-throated blues. What drove the sylvan selection of a lynch mob, the macabre, the forest crews? What made some choose the species from which offending Negroes might swing? Billy's poplars bore strange fruit. She used the words Abel Miracle wrote. Was her lyric, her croon, an ode to night rider clansman preference for young Liriodendron tulipifera, a tree still short enough to sling up a noose? Or maybe it was a lyrical journalistic treatise on racist vigilante prefaces for Eastern cottonwood. Sprouting, clonally prolific, populist deltoides, quick-growing whips pioneering on some slow, muddy river oxbow growing lynch branch thick. I do know that a loblolly or longleaf, taida or palustris by specific epithet would not likely do. The limbs crowned too high to pull a struggling body up, far beyond sufficient never walk this earth again height. No need for all the overkill or inconvenience. The finest kind tend to be too tall for proper lynching and much too straight. No hemp hitching place on the sap weeping bowls that some finicky woodpecker might be inclined to excavate. Not even a scraggly nigger pine. Now that's the colloquial nomen. It's Virginia by Latinized name. Would suffice. There's too much nappy-needled clutter to allow the rotting corpse to properly dance. A willow of any kind, even Salix nigra or an eastern redbud, the so-called Judas tree my grandmother claimed Jesus' disciple ended his thrice before the cock crew denying life on, would be too weak, too brittle, too brash for all that kicking, all that thrashing of the colored, tortured, and condemned. This odd wondering of mine over trees interrupts the feather fascination, becomes nagging dendritic obsession. I recall the lessons learned from textbooks, then apply them and expand them to fit my black prismed quirks. Logically, it seems to me that an old live oak would better suit the grisly gatherings. The God-fearing throngs come together after church or family dinners of fried chicken and rice. Droves of good citizens come together to watch white mob injustices, metered out by short lengths of twine. Don't just make it a men's-only affair. Bring along the wife and children. That way the legacy gets passed on, generation to generation. All gleeful in the glow of kerosene lamps and fat knot torches. The coarse line tossed over low-slung limbs to stretch black necks and tortured, choking death. Quercus virginiana reaches gargantuan proportions in open-grown situations, commonly cultured in small-town parks. Graceful droops, Spanish moss-draped antebellum arms, elephantine themselves along genteel plantation avenues, where in the good old days, people knew their rightful places. These giants make perfect stages to string up innocent folk, to set the order right again. Make good on master race promises, a great, again, reset, if you will, the superior quality of any Quercus tightly grained wood, strong enough to mast sailing ships, provide endless supplies of strange fruit carcasses, stout enough to bear so much hate as to strangle railroaded black men, pulled at midnight from conveniently left open jail cells, stout enough to kill black women, rumored to utter disrespectful cross words. They were silent all along. Stout enough to murder black children that never whistled at white women who claimed by bold-faced lies they did. How would the discerning racist choose from so much lethal standing timber? Please forgive me, Mr. Frost, but the woods are not always lovely. They may be darker and deeper for some than others. Stands of trees snagging memories like so much human flotsam, or straining bloated black bodies from sluggish streams, swollen and beaten to unrecognizable, closed casket status leaves generations of weeping unseen. Back and forth my mind and heart flows between birds I see in the past and future tenses of hanging trees. I'm told by some I should let such things go. History is far gone into the past, but then I can't. Horror has set up in my annual rings, grow season by season beneath my skin, in my brain, under the bark rough and smooth that seals the screens in souls and sapwood. The forest witnessed the now invisible, grown over by unspoken truths, remembered in leaves sucking life from blood-soaked roots. My personal dendrology succeeds upon itself, grows in nightmarish tangles from old field meetings to old growth vigilant deaths. Odd wondering on what was, what could be. The lynching habits of trees. Whether I might become Billie Holiday's Fresh Harvest is a constant haunting thing. An ecology born of fear, a botany thicketed in pain. This, Lindsay, is lynching real. Understand? So, that's for Lindsay. Thank you to whomever requested that.
It was anonymous attendee, so we'll have to find out later. But that's a very powerful poem, Drew. That is an epic. There are a couple of questions, Drew, if I could read them. Do you want to do those now, Drew?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I love questions.
There's a guy writes, thanks, Dr. Lanham. I appreciated your relating hashtag Blackbirders Week and hashtag Black Lives Matter. How do we continue hashtag Blackbirders Week and the energy behind it to help not only blackbirding, but address the broader issue?
Well, I think, and I talk about lighting fires, and once we light a fire, ecologically, I think about what it takes to keep a forest healthy, to keep a longleaf pine forest healthy. And you drop the match, or you let the torch drip, as my friend Johnny Stowe would say. But then you have to tend that fire. And so now we have to tend the fire. And so I think it's important to keep telling stories as a writer. And a speaker, you'll often have people who will wince at the same story or hearing stories of difficulty or what we've experienced. But I think it's important that we continue the refrain. Not only continue the refrain as a way of tending the fire, but light the fire in others. Have folks understand, so sort of what the real issue is here. And part of that real issue is, as my grandmother used to say, is taking the scales off your eyes and truly see it. And I would offer not just truly seeing those around you, but for my bird watching friends, taking your binoculars down from time to time and seeing what's around those birds, recognizing the communities, recognizing the people who may be shoulder to shoulder with you who are different. That's an important thing to me. One of the things that was critical for Black Birders Week was the feeling of not being alone. And not being alone, I think, not only refers to seeing other people who look like you and share cultural experiences, but having other people see you and respect you for who you are. To not dismiss you by saying, I don't see color. To not dismiss you by saying, I don't like the politics of that on this birding listserv and taking the listserv down, as many did. And so for those listservs that decided to not join us in broadening what bird watching and birding is, they've done so at their own peril. I think it's a ready sign of really of non-association. It makes the weeding easy. So that's tending the fire. Tending the fire is not going back to the old normal. Tending the fire is making the hard decisions to choose with whom you associate and the groups you choose to affiliate. That's tending the fire. And that goes to the broader issue. It goes to the broader issue of making bird watching, of bird adoring, making it a broader thing, of understanding when you're in the South Carolina low country and looking across all of that rice marsh, what it took to create that. That black birds that you see many of them are there because of black hands. And so not divorcing ourselves from history, not divorcing yourselves of the difficulty and the struggle that must occur in native nations. I'm trying to imagine having sacred ground lorded over by the statues of white men. And so that is tending the fire, not only for our black lives that matter, but expanding it and seeing the color and seeing the injustices that have been rendered to many across this nation. And so I think one of the most heartening things to me in response to that question in the movement and in the streets is seeing people risking their lives, their very lives in a pandemic, to stand shoulder to shoulder, not just black to black, but black to white, to red, to yellow, to all colors, to all genders and non-gender designations, to old and young. That I always think about Charlie Harper's painting, Mystery of the Missing Migrants, which inspires so much of my work. If there was some way that I could tell Charlie Harper how much that painting means to me, seeing a flock of migrating birds that he depicts against an ink blue sky pin-pricked with yellow stars, and that these birds of all hues and shapes are migrating together towards some common destination, some common goal of not just surviving, but thriving and reproducing themselves so that the world becomes a better place because of their presence. I find great empathy in that art. And so I try to have my life imitate that art. And so I think that's what Black Birders Week did for me. And I know it did for many, and I'm so grateful to so many. I would leave out a name if I tried to mention everyone, but Corinna and Ty Key, and so many, and Jason Ward, so many others who took the time, took the effort to help people understand that we are out there. We are out there, and I'm so heartened when I get a note, an email, a message from another Black birder who's out there somewhere. I'm thinking of April, I think up in Michigan, who wrote me a while back as a Black birder about my age, who was looking for other people like her to sort of to flock with, but was also having some difficulty in dealing with insensitivity among some of the bird watching community. So tending the fire, keep that in mind. It's easy to drop the match. It's easy to start the fire. Then you got to tend it. And tending that fire is as critical as anything. So I'm looking forward as an older, a more mature Black birder, of helping these amazing young people tend the fires that they've started. I give credit to my friends, Dudley Edmondson and so many that really Doug Gray and Dave Magpion and Jeremy Alexander and Roy Rodriguez and Mary Gustafson and Ken and Kim Kaufman and so many people in the birding community who've been brave. To Christian Cooper, who experienced that horrific incident in Central Park of having the police weaponized against him. It is all such an amazing thing to have others join you in common cause. So tend the fire.
Drew, we've got another question, and just so you know, I've got a picture of you leaning against that 1936 Pontiac in the Eastwoods that we came across, so the four-door. The question is, on a bird walk last year at Montpelier, you spoke of how birds were a constant reminder of freedom to the enslaved, toiling under James Madison's gaze. We came across an open field and heard the plaintive, melancholic call of a field sparrow and likened it to the sound of blues. How can birds and nature in general help us center the critical, still untold story of the enslaved at Montpelier in the story of America?
Wow, it's that field sparrow song, that just that plaintive song of that bird that would have been likely around on site as enslaved people toiled those fields. All you have to do is think about looking up or seeing something, seeing something that you don't have. And enslaved narratives and escaped enslaved narratives are full of references to birds. You think about Harriet Tubman using barred owl calls to communicate that was a signal to follow. That was a signal to freedom. That the songs of birds, my grandmother used to sing, "His eye is on the sparrow," and if God's eye is on the sparrow, I know he's watching me. And early on, at least from that faith tradition of Christianity, that a sparrow, that a little brown bird that most never see, that is so easy to ignore, that there is hope in that bird, that the God that you worship sees the sparrow, and so you know that there is hope for you. So, birds have always for humans been metaphors of freedom and choice. And so those were not lost on enslaved peoples, but not only as metaphors, but as birds in daily life that they depended on for sustenance, not only soul sustenance, but for nutritive sustenance. And Matt can speak to some of the artifacts that the remains of birds that have been found in some of the excavations. But I think now it helps us to look at that land, and graduate student that I have the pleasure of working with, William Slater, as he investigates witness trees on Montpelier, as we are in those forests, and we try to help the trees tell their stories that birds are telling stories of a forest that has changed dramatically since enslaved were tilling it. That has changed dramatically in ways as to make it almost unrecognizable unless you're taking a forest walk with Dr. Reeves and you're able to see colonnades of tulip poplars marking a field line. That you have the opportunity to walk a straight channel that was dug by black hands to move water off of that flooded bottom. That you have the opportunity to visit a hearth where people warmed their hands after a cold day of work and prepared a meal in a tiny house on a ridge overlooking a place that they would likely never leave. And to hear birds all around, for me, is inspiration not just to know the place as it exists now, but to think about what must have been. And so when I talk about reconciliation, when I talk about ecological reconciliation, when I talk about ecological reparation, I speak to the power of the land to repair. That time has a great factor in that, but also a recognition of past sins against the land. That telling the full truths of what happened on that land are as important as understanding the present tense of the land. And birds help us tell those stories. So I hope that gets at the question. I could write a whole book on it, and I'm trying to do that, sort of as we speak, Matt. But it's.
Oh, Drew, you got to write that book. You've got to write that book. Whatever I can do, whatever we can do to help you, we're there for you, my friend.
Well, it's in the process of being written now. But Matt, I'm so grateful to what Montpelier has provided in the present tense, and to being invited to that initial charrette to be able to sit around and to think. And I'll tell you, for quite a bit of that time, I was wondering, because I had turned down the opportunity at first and was asked again, and the time had freed up, and the opportunity to be in a place where so much of this nation came to be under sinful pretense, and I'll use that word in the broadest sense. Again, I want people to imagine what it took to keep people enslaved, and then to imagine those ripple effects to even now, and to think about police brutality as beginning with an overseer, and slave chasers, and dogs, and whips, and amputations, and executions. There's so much yet to be learned in revealing the past. And I think that's what Montpelier uniquely offers us the chance to do. To see the beauty, because there's certainly beauty there, and at times I get lost in it in those forests. But then I can look down and always remember the ground I stand on. And to hear a wood thrush sing, to me, is to hear the ghost of our ancestors singing. And so I'm thankful, I'm grateful for the descendant community there. I'm looking forward to hearing stories from them, to communing with them, to understanding how they see the land, because they have blood and sweat and tears that have nourished the very trees that the wood thrush sings from. So I'm looking forward to more work and more words.
Well, Drew, the ancestors have called you here, and I'm glad you heeded their call. And with the wood thrush keeps you coming back. So everything that you write is just solace to the soul. And thank you for turning our attention to what the birds can really, how they can draw an analogy to our life and history here at Montpelier. And you and your work are a huge part of what we're moving towards, Drew.
Well, it's an honor to be the ecology, the ecologist in residence, and you know, hoping to do more, and for a very long time, and working with you, Matt, and with Roy and Elizabeth and so many others there, and so grateful to Kat Imhoff, you know, in the past position that Roy now holds. So grateful to all the collaborators up there, and really grateful to those folks who came to this reading, this brain and heart dump of mine.
And we still have 50 people. We still have 50 people on, Drew. So, and I see Roy is here as well. Roy, do you have some words?
Well, so I wanted to echo much of what has been spoken about and felt, and Drew, you know, it's interesting how different paths, how different experiences can bring us to the same place, and I feel as if you and I are kindred in so many ways. So thank you for this. Thank you for your inspiration and your work. But I just want to say, I want to reiterate one thing that you said, which I think is so important right now, which is what is to come is within reach. And I just, that you know, above and beyond everything that was so helpful tonight to hear, that was so important for me to not only hear, but to imagine. So thank you. And thank you, Matt, for hosting Drew, and for all that both of you do for our shared history and for Montpelier.
Thank you, friends, for everything, and you know, I look forward to the times beyond all these plagues when we can commune again in that very special place up there to unearth more of the truth, and to revel in what's to come. That's in reach, indeed, Roy. So thank you very much, and thank you, Matt. And thank you, audience, for coming. I look forward to more.
Amen to that. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Roy. And thank you to everybody for attending tonight. We'll put the recording of this on YouTube, so if you missed anything, you can catch up with that. Also, Drew, the poem for Lindsay, is that in your anthology, Sparrow's Envy?
No, it's not. It's not been published yet. I haven't really pushed it out. But I want it to be published. I'm not sure whether it's going to be a broadside. Somehow, you know, we talked about doing some of that stuff, Matt. But it's a piece that I think I probably wrote. Man, I've worked that piece for a long time, and I want it to get out. Maybe I need to make it available to. Maybe I can get it signed by the senator. I don't know.
It needs to be out there. So, well, thank you so much, Drew. We're gonna have many more of these events, and looking forward when we can have everybody back, and especially us out in the woods.
Yeah, same here, Matt.
Okay. Well, good night, everybody, and we'll be in touch. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Roy.
Good night, all. Stay safe.